Hi everyone, Anani420 here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Artificial Brain record, Labyrinth Constellation. This is the debut full-length LP from New York metal outfit Artificial Brain. It is a death metal record. Really? Ew. Ew. Why would you say ew when death metal is such a good genre?
Okay, it's not good, and here's why. 1, it's poo. 2, it's pee. 3, it's poo and pee.
You know, I could argue with you, but instead, I'm going to change your mind with the power of music.
Is that a big empty 3-player?
No, it's the sound of opening your mind in 1, 2,
4.
4.
People are terrible because they won't give death metal music a good fair shake. They hear that music is death metal music and they don't even want to listen to the music. They assume that they're gonna hate the death metal music before they have even listened to the death metal music. Come on, people, give the death metal music a nice fair shake. Be a good person, have an open mind, listen to the death metal music, you might like it.
So, that's not a big empty 3-player?
I hate Caljuchesta. So, yeah, death metal, just like the song said, doesn't always get a fair shake. And with the genre's really heavy use of distortion and really gruff, guttural, gruesome vocals, blast beats, I can sort of understand why most people shy away from it. I personally am not really even a huge fan of every single subgenre that this style of music has to offer. I'm not huge on a lot of the more progressive and more technical stuff that comes out of death metal. Usually I'm not moved by those sounds. I like my death metal a little more bloody and visceral, but Artificial Brain's new record here, Labyrinth Constellation, does sort of seem to sit further on that more technical side of the spectrum. In case you didn't know, this record actually features Revocation guitarist Dan Garigulo, but me personally, I was most excited to hear that recording and production was handled on this record by Colin Marston, multi-instrumentalist, songwriter, and member of bands like Gorguts, Behold the Arctopus, Dysrhythmia, Krallis, and he typically doesn't record or write with a band unless they're doing something pretty forward-thinking. And I do think Artificial Brain lives up to that expectation. They do have a lot of the foundational qualities of death metal, but they push many of them to an extreme, or they experiment with them in some kind of significant way. For one, the really angular and difficult guitar riffs on this record tie together into a web from which there is no escape. And these riffs lock in perfectly with some really intense and busy drum patterns. Artificial Brain always seems to be looking for that next significant change they can make to the song, and yet all the tracks here feel really fluid and cohesive. It's not like they're so herky and jerky that you're hearing all these miscellaneous parts that don't really sound like they have anything to do with one another. So I wouldn't say that this record is too jarring, and yet it's not like all of these flashy technical guitars and drums sound so uniform that everything here blends together into this formless, flavorless soup of guitar and drum noise. I think what really makes this record special is the really shrill and bright and strange guitar chords played throughout this thing, the really mutant melodies played on the leads. They're weird, but oddly catchy as well. There are moments where the melodies on this LP feel pretty anthemic, like the title track on this LP and the closer Moon Funeral. And sometimes these guitar leads build up to an explosion of melody that is sometimes eerie or even triumphant. I like that Artificial Brain really appreciates contrast on this record. They're always putting moments that are really chaotic and nasty and disgusting and just really difficult to pull apart up against spots that are a little bit more accessible and, again, melodic. And often these more melodic guitars are layered on top of one another like a very noisy, ear-tickling pig pile in the same way that they would be multi-tracked on like a Krallis record. And even though I do see common ground between Artificial Brain and bands like Krallis, I think what happens on this LP is much more violent and sort of unpredictable. And on top of being compositionally adventurous, I think that some of the songs on this LP are sonically adventurous too. There's a good handful of tracks on this LP that feature some kind of sound experimentation, and whether or not it's a big experiment or a small one, it does add something significant to the song. Like the song Absorbing Black Ignition, which I think is my favorite track on here, has a very eerie set of organ chords at the finish line. Or the track Frozen Planet, which has all these strange icy tones hanging in the background, backing up the guitars and the drums and the bass. There's some chilling tones hanging in the background of the song Hormones Echo as well, which makes the song not only feel like a death metal track, but like a sci-fi soundtrack feature as well. And the song Bastard Planet, right in the middle point of the song, there's this giant explosion of drums and bass that's incredibly heavy, really a highlight for me on the record. This moment in the song is so dense and so saturated, it's hard to tell one instrument from another with just how condensed it is. Throughout this whole LP, the vocals consistently push the envelope of low, guttural, and kind of gross. And overall, the recording on this thing, I'm really happy with it, really impressed with it. I like that it's so clear, it's punchy, the performances, the execution on this thing is great, the drums sound fantastic, the guitars sound fantastic, it's all so honed and together. The music here reaches such a high level of virtuosity without shooting for a recording that sounds overproduced, really quantized, or digital. The instrumentation on this record just feels so organic and in the moment. And added on top of all of these really good sounds, this great recording, these interesting and well-written death metal tracks, there is kind of a theme behind this album between the song titles and some of the more experimental sounds. I mean, there's a bit of a science fiction thing going on here with planets and moons and constellations. In that regard, there are elements of this LP that remind me a bit of Vector. If you're into a metal band with more of an intergalactic sound, then check this LP out, because I do think that, like Vector, this record does have melodies that feel kind of from another world entirely. As far as shortcomings that this LP has, I do think that this thing is a little one-sided in terms of intensity and chaos. A lot of the songs on here tend to just sort of bust in when they start. I wish that the band showed a little bit more finesse in that regard. And there are moments on here toward the first half of the album, like Worm Harvester and Frozen Planets, that blend together a little bit. Still, I think the playing and the writing on this LP is great. I think that this record is a really creative take on the technical death metal style. There's a lot of power and dexterity and energy to the playing on this record, and what's most exciting is some of the sonic experimentation that these guys bring to the table. I would love to hear them keep up this technical edge into the future, but maybe dive even deeper into some of these sound experiments. I'm feeling a light to decent 8 on this. I'm feeling a light to decent 8 on this thing. Transition. If you've given this album a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Hate it? Why? And what do you think I should review next? Also, shout out to Matt Fiel for the death metal song, You're the Best. Anthony Fantano, Artificial Brain, forever.